I'm Sarah Jackson, and this is Internal Comms Pro, the podcast. We're getting the gears turning as we talk to the experts on our ever-changing world of internal communications. This season, we're shifting the mindset.
Yeah, I love Jeff Bezos' philosophy on branding. It's your brand is how people talk about you when you're not in the room. And I think that's a really powerful thing. How do other people talk about you or your brand or your organization or your culture when you are not there? How is it defined? And that's really tough because every organization is different.
Out of the number of topics we've covered on the show, this might be the first time we're focused on branding. Today, we're focusing on your company's brand, more specifically, your company's brand story. Today, we're chatting with Ben Baker, president of Your Brand Marketing and podcast host for Your Living Brand live show. Ben has worn a lot of hats, and he's given us the opportunity today to see how employees truly affect their company's brand story and how you can uncover the gems that can make up an authentic internal brand story for your company. Let's jump in.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. My name's Ben Baker. I have two companies. One is called Your Brand Marketing, and I am the president and CEO of that. And then there's the Communicate Your Why podcast network, and I'm the executive producer.
Well, I cannot wait to jump into the conversation today. First of all, with you becoming president and now having your own show, can you sort of give us your backstory? How did you get involved in the world of internal communications?
Yeah, I got into communications 25 years ago. I got out of high tech. For those people who have seen the movie Up in the Air with George Clooney, that was my life. I was literally in the air 200 plus days a year. I knew every cabin crew. I knew every pilot and co-pilot. I knew the people at the front desk. I knew, I never ever stopped at the Hertz rent-a-counter. I just went right to my car and drove away. And I did that for a number of years and realized that it was just not a life I wanted anymore. So about the time I got married, so about 25 years ago, I took a deep look and said, what do I really want to do? And it was helping people communicate more effectively. That's what I was really good at. I wanted to get out of sales. I wanted to get out of high tech, and I wanted to get into communication. And I got lucky enough to start off in the direct mail business. And that was a real godsend because it really got you to very quickly get to the point of why are people going to open up my particular piece of mail? Why do they care about this? What makes it different? What makes you unique? What differentiates you? How do you motivate these specific people to care enough about you to not only open up the envelope, but to actually act on it? And there's been 25 years of those type of conversations that have gone on, and it's gone from direct mail to promotional marketing to trade show development to social media marketing to branding, and all of these things happen at the same time to internal communications.
So, talk to me, how do you define a company's internal brand? And is there a framework that you can provide our listeners today that would help them organize that or identify that or kind of become aware of what is our brand and our brand story?
Yeah, I love Jeff Bezos' philosophy on branding. It's your brand is how people talk about you when you're not in the room. And I think that's a really powerful thing. How do other people talk about you or your brand or your organization or your culture when you are not there? How is it defined? And that's really tough because every organization is different. You could have 3 different tool manufacturers. They all make hammers. Their brand and their culture are going to be completely different. And it's based on who are the people in the organization? What are they passionate about? Where did they come from as an organization? Why did they get into building hammers in the first place? Who are they passionate about as customers? And why do their customers care about them? And the more that the people inside the company can understand that, understand where we came from, where we are, and where we're going, the more they can tell that brand story both internally, and that becomes the basis of decision making, of of culture, of who gets promoted, how people get promoted, how decisions are made, how meetings are conducted, etc. And it also gives the individual employees at all levels the basic understanding of how we should treat our either ourselves, our fellow teammates, and also our customers.
So, if I'm trying to plan for my year, I'm an internal communicator and I want to make sure that I align my communications plan with our company's brand story. What's my first step? What am I doing to identify that and hone in on what the brand story is?
I think the thing that most people miss doing this is talking to the individual stakeholders within the company, is to sit there and say, what is legal thinking for 2022? What's operations thinking about for 22? What's customer experience thinking? What's sales? What's marketing thinking about? And being able to get the holistic view of how do we take all these different objectives, all these different opinions, all these different sets of internal goals within their department, and bring them all together to be able to have one consistent message. How do we bring the different departments together and let them to understand that just because you're at odds today with the CFO doesn't mean that the CFO is wrong, and the CFO's viewpoint and their objectives are wrong. It just means that they're looking at the company from a different point of view that you are, and it's your job to understand that, to see how those objectives fit in with the overall goals, and be able to bring all those different objectives together. And it's not easy. I'll be the first person to guess that this is not something that you could do overnight, and it's not something that's easy. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of effort, and a lot of listening.
So, talk to me about that. Why, if I'm going to go down this road and you're talking about it is not easy, are some pitfalls that I might encounter as I'm trying to uncover this and trying to get to this one message that you referenced?
I think the biggest pitfall is assumptions. Everybody assumes that everybody understands what the overall goals and objectives, culture, purpose, whatever you want to call it, of the organization is understood. We've said it once. They heard about it when they got onboarded. Everybody understands. We say something about it for 2.3 seconds in our shareholder meeting or our annual report or our annual meetings. Everybody understands exactly which way we're going. And that is a major challenge, is the fact that we assume that everybody, because they were onboarded, they know what's going on. That the people understand that what legal is doing, what accounting is doing, what customer experience is doing, how all this thing fits together, and it drives one goal, one message, one value statement. And I think that word assumption is what kills a lot of organizations.
So, I'm curious of what your thinking is here. Before any of our listeners who are internal communicators go down this road, and if it is their job and would help them to identify their internal brand story, do they need to back up a bit and re-educate internally what their department is? Because the role could have changed.
Yeah, I mean, because there's a lot of organizations where internal comms that says, "Oh, those are the guys that create our newsletter. Those are the guys that tweak the internal website, the wiki, or whatever it is, or they're the people who handle the Slack channel." And you're far more than that. You are far more than that. Your job as internal communicators is to enable people within the organization to understand what's going on in the organization, what's happening, where are the challenges, where are the pitfalls, what has happened, what is happening, what's going to happen, why. How does it affect you individual as a person? How does it affect individual teams? How do we sit there and realize that this particular team is not understanding what the objectives are, and be able to give them the tools that they need to be able to succeed effectively? That's where internal comms should be thinking, and that's what the brand should be. And the problem is, if C-suite and senior people just look at you as an expense, if they just look at you as an item on a GL, and they sit there and go, "Oh God, okay, it's internal comms again. They're just they just need money for a new newsletter." there's no value there. And I think that it's the questions that we ask and the ability to sit there and say, wait a second here, the organization's broken. We have the great resignation happening here. There's a reason for it. What are the reasons are happening is because people don't trust companies. They don't trust individual leaders. They don't feel they're being listened to, understood, and valued. That's the role of internal comms, is to be able to put the finger in the dike and stop that, because every employee that's being lost could potentially cost the company $100,000 to replace. And if we, as internal comms people, are not sounding that alarm and offering viable solutions to be able to fix that problem, all we're doing is rearranging chairs on the Titanic. That's all we're doing, is to be able to sit there and say, if we don't give the company the ability to be able to sit there going, look, this is who we are as a brand. We are a hardworking, fast organization that is not involved in culture issues. We're not a woohoo company. This is what we do.
Our talk with Ben will continue after a message from our friends at Circle. One of the easiest ways to strategically shift your department is through figuring out what metrics matter and tracking them. Our sponsor Circle knows that each IC department are as unique as snowflakes. That's why the Circle Broadcast Suite provides communicators with custom, shareable dashboards. Use your unique content and channel analytics to provide department insights to your team and higher-ups. Head on over to circle.com/ICP. That's CERKL.com/ICP to learn more about how you can broadcast your employee stories in an impactful way. Welcome back. Now that we have an understanding of what a brand story is and how it influences your position with the C-suite, we'll learn more about how you can develop it, the questions you should be asking, and how to present your findings. Let's dive back in. Okay. So then I'm interviewing different departments and I'm getting in their language what they think that means, so that I could potentially use maybe some of their key messaging or words or phrases and for the internal branding. As I'm explaining this, are there other elements of a brand story? Like, is it visually then represented? Do I hire a designer? Is it different than our external brand? Can you kind of give me some maybe touch points along the way of how do I develop my company's brand story?
Absolutely. And once you understand what the brand story is, let's assume that we understand what our brand is, what we do, why we do it, who we do it for, what the communication message is, what we're trying to achieve. Now we need to take a look at, how do people contextually understand within your company? Are people visual learners? Are people education learners? Do we need more training? Do we need more development? Do we need more, videos? Do we need a podcast? We run internal podcasts for large to enterprise level companies that enable them to have those internal conversations at all different types of levels, knowing that information is secure within the organization. And it's not being streamed on iHeart or Spotify or iTunes. It's internal and permission only to be in it. That's a great way, from different voices and different point of views, to be able to get that message across. But it's not the only way. I don't think there is one way to communicate. I think what you need to do is understand, are you an organization of 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000? Are you dealing in North America? Are you dealing in Europe? Are you dealing worldwide? Are you dealing in multiple languages and multiple cultures? And I think that all of these things need to be taken into consideration, because how you communicate the message in downtown Tokyo is very different from how you're going to do it in Omaha, Nebraska. And I think you need to take a look at it and sit there going, okay, who are the people within our organization? What do we need to tell them? How are they going to best internalize this information? Let's provide a series of different options that are going to work for our particular teams. And one more thing, you need to have a feedback loop. You need to desperately have a feedback loop or a series of feedback loops to make sure that as you're sending out this information, it is actually being listened to. It is actually being understood. It is actually being valued and acted upon. Because just because we assume that these people are going to get it and we worked with them and we've tried the situation, hey, listen, I've created videos that I thought were perfect, that said everything that I wanted to say. I've tested them out on a small audience. I've sent them out to the larger audience, and they fell flat.
And how did you find that out? When you say a series of feedback loop, I'm assuming you're talking about certain types of data points that you're getting. Can you dive in a little bit deeper to that? What are some examples of feedback loops that are effective? Like, how did you know the video fell flat?
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at things over, taking, for example, a series of surveys, and I hate surveys as much as the next person, but they have their purpose. Okay, surveys are not end all or be all, but what they are is they're lines in the sand. They give you an idea of where people are in a certain point of time. And if you can sit there and say, okay, let's take a look at a survey now. Let's do the same survey in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year from now, whatever your period is, and be able to sit there and say, what are the changes? Have we made effective change? How have people's perceptions changed? How do people answer specific questions? And you don't want the survey to be too long, but you want it to be long enough that it's going to answer the questions that you need to answer. But what you need to do is to be able to sit there going, are people actually getting what I'm going to say? And if they're not, you need to be able to go out to those individual bases and say, okay, why? Why are, if in 3 months or 6 months change, you're expecting to see this change within the market and you're not seeing any change whatsoever, then you need to go back to the drawing board and sit there and go, okay, why are people not doing this? And I think as comms people, we need to be constantly asking, are people understanding? And if they're not, what am I doing wrong? Not what are they doing wrong?
Well, and again, this season we've been talking about shifting our minds around how we do internally communicate. And I love the list that you just gave us. To our listeners' credit, it's because they're always so underwater, which is why I want them, before they talk about their company's brand story, to really assess their department's brand story. Because here's the deal. If you've got one person doing internal communications, say for a 7,000 employee,
God
7,000
help you.
employees.
If you are that person, I pity you 100%.
Right.
So
I think they need to think about, before going into 2022, what are they going to do and what are they not going to do? And this ties back to the very first thing that you said, which is, I want to get back to the individual listener who is underwater sitting here thinking about this, just like you, who you were in the air and you were like, this isn't the life I wanted. What do I really want to do? When you identified that within yourself, was there a certain process that you used? Because I think our listener needs to pause within themselves. You can't do everything. So how do they, within themselves, if they are a one or two woman, two man band, identify that and then figure out the rest of the needs of their department? Does that make sense?
yeah, and I think that what we need to do is stop thinking yourselves as a tactical department and start thinking yourselves as, how do I strategically help the company be more effective? And if you can sit there and make that mindset shift in both how you act, how you talk, and how you engage other people within the organization, all of a sudden your department goes from being a cost center to sit there and say, look, because we're not doing this, this, and this, it's costing the company this much money. These are the ramifications. These are the amount of people we're losing on a regular basis. This is the brain drain that's going out the office. And on a yearly basis, this is the money that's out the door. And that might mean making friends with the CFO or people in the accounting department or people within some in the statistical department, or maybe even the marketing department, and being able to sit there and say, I'm creating a budget based on the fact of how much money me spending this money is going to save you. And I think that a lot of organizations, and it's not just internal comms, It's a lot of people don't understand how to talk to the C-suite. They don't understand the language of the C-suite. They don't understand the decision-making process of the C-suite, and they don't understand how to be able to, justify their value within the larger organization, to be able to say, hey, listen, I'm not spending this money because it's a nice to have. I'm spending this money because it's going to make the company money, or it's going to save the company money. And this is how. And when we can make that shift in our mindset, and we can make that shift in how we communicate, all of a sudden we go from being an expense to a profit center. And once we're a profit center, it's amazing how all of a sudden you go from 3 to 5 to 10 to 20 people in your department doing different things with a larger budget, because people say, wait a second, if I give money to internal comms, if we give them $1 million, they're going to save us $8 million. And that's where the shift has got to be.
Well, and that's why I think your process of interviewing the different departments, not only to get the company brand story, but to get, or the company's internal brand story, but to get your department's internal brand story, is to have the key conversation with the CFO. And we've had several podcasts, a wonderful podcast episode where I actually interviewed a CFO and said, all right, what do they think of internal comms? Like, to get self-awareness, and then to say, what would you like to see? Or, hey, we're working on our strategic goals for 2022. We want to align with the company. We want to know what makes sense for our initiatives, and to be able to, what language like that would you give our listeners if I am going to go knock on the CFO's, door?
I'm sure you got some very enlightening conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would be interested, is there anything when you say, hey, people don't know how to talk to the C-suite, they don't know how to do that. Do you have, tips on that, or how do I get better at knowing those things?
I think you get better at knowing those things by asking those people. Having informational interviews with these people, taking, in the days when we could take them out for coffee, you took them out for coffee, or lunch. And it's well worth it, you spending part of your budget within your department to take these people out for lunch, to be able to get to know them as individuals and understand what are the challenges that they're facing, what are the things that are important to them within the organization, how do they make budgetary decisions, and what are the things that they're looking for in order to be able to help the organization grow. And when we can do that with different parts of the organization, and we understand that from multiple points of view, we can bring all that together and say, hey, wait a second here. I'm talking to the CEO. Say, look, I've been talking to the CFO, I've been talking to operations, I've been talking to marketing, sales, and a couple other divisions, and I'm realizing that here is a thread that's going through the conversation. Here is a single challenge that's going on through, doesn't matter which department we're in. I think we can solve it by doing this. We could run a test program for X amount of money. I think by doing this, we're going to be able to save the company Y amount of money. Would you be interested in at least starting a 6-month trial program to be able to see whether this works or doesn't? And I think that if we can do stuff like that, we put ourselves in a completely different category.
I love it. Well, if our audience did want to connect with you, tell us again, how can they do that? Do you have a website? Can they connect with you on LinkedIn? And where do we find your wonderful show?
Yeah, you can find everything through yourbrandmarketing.com. If you go to yourbrandmarketing.com, you'll find access to my show, to all my consulting services. It'll bring you to the Communicate Your Why. It'll take you to our internal podcast program. Everything is sitting there under yourbrandmarketing.com. And there's also links to my social media. So everything is sitting right there, including, if you look at the top left-hand corner, there's my email address. There is my phone number, so people can call me directly, or people can book 30 minutes for free, and I will have a one-on-one conversation with people, understand where they are, and see if there's ways that we can help them be more effective.
I love it. I love it so much, especially if you are that one or two person woman or man. This is great, way to extend your team by engaging Ben and all the wonderful services that you have to offer. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Sarah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show. You know what, everybody? This is a fun place to be. We just have to sit there and get our seat at the table because we all deserve it.
And there you have it. I love Ben's tips on how we, as internal communicators, can put ourselves in a completely different category. Internal communicators, we know we're valuable, and showing interest in our company's brand story is another way to show that. Now, don't go away just yet. We have a new segment featuring our good friends from Ragan's Communications Leadership Council on how you can use today's episode learnings right now. Let's tune in.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm Mandy Zaransky-Hurst, Chief Operating Officer and Head of Leadership Councils for Ragan Communications. The Communications Leadership Council is an exclusive membership for senior level communicators where we share best practices, networking, and offer team training to bolster all levels of communicators within organizations. Today, I'm here with Amanda Schoch, Chief Operating Officer from the Pacific Northwest National Lab. Amanda's a Communications Leadership Council member and somebody that I really, really respect in the comms community. Amanda, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me here today, Mandy.
Of course. Can you tell us a little bit about your role as the Chief Comms Officer at PNNL?
Sure, I'd love to. So first, I guess I should just say a little bit about what PNNL is to help set the stage. We're one of the Department of Energy's national labs with deep roots in the Pacific Northwest. Every day, our scientists take on some of the world's greatest science and technology challenges to advance the frontiers of knowledge. Every national lab within the DOE enterprise brings different strengths to the table. At PNNL, we have a distinctive strengths in chemistry, earth sciences, biology, and data science. Whether our researchers are unlocking the mysteries of Earth's climate, helping modernize the US electric power grid, or safeguarding ports around the world from nuclear smuggling, we accept great challenges for one purpose: to create a safer, cleaner, more prosperous, and more secure world. And I have the privilege of helping our scientists tell their stories. In my role as Chief Communications Officer, I develop and execute comm strategies that really elevate the lab's visibility, recognition, and support as a world-class research organization. And while I get to carry the title, it's really the talented team of communication and technical publishing professionals that I work with every day that help ensure that all of our audiences, both internal and external, understand the lab's mission and the impact of our work.
You are one of the greatest storytellers of the communications professionals I've met over the course of my career. So that is, I think, your claim to fame. Though there are many, that is your biggest strength, as I see it. When I ask communicators about their Achilles heel, so many of them say the intranet for their organization. I'd love to know, especially as a storyteller, I'd love to know how you have reimagined the intranet, and if I'm on base by saying that the intranet is also potentially an Achilles heel that you've faced.
Yeah, that is such a great question, Mandy. And I think it goes back to we always tend to take care of ourselves last. And so organizations tend to focus on, what is their main purpose in the world, and how do we execute on that? And then how do we tell our stories externally? And so internets, at least in my experience, tend to be places where you throw up all the information you have in kind of not really a thoughtful manner. And so I think over time, internets become a little bit unwieldy. They kind of lose their purpose. They're hard to navigate, and we don't really approach it with kind of a user experience perspective in mind. And I've seen that in all of the organizations I've worked for, and quite frankly, this current job and my last job, this was something I was really trying to tackle. I think an internet really is the place where you should be inspiring your workforce, and providing an experience that underpins the life cycle of each of your employees and is an extension of your recruitment and retainment strategy. And so I think we have real opportunities as communicators to really look at our intranets and build them in ways that are meaningful to our employees.
So, how have you used your storytelling ability to create the power to drive people to the intranet? I love what you said about all of the different life cycle events of an employee and really trying to inspire. It puts a lot of pressure on this intranet when sometimes people only go there to see what's on the cafeteria lunch menu. So, how do you drive people there so that they have a chance to really consume the meaningful content that exists?
Well, I think a little bit of it is if you build it, they will come. And so starting with what do you want the experience to be and how do you make it so that it's actually sought out by your employees is really important. One of the things prior to this job, I worked in the intelligence community and we talked a lot about telling our stories. And that's really hard when you're working in a space where a lot of your mission is secret. Um, but as internal communicators, we can really use our success stories and our human beings to share, our successes and build engagement around the activities, the way we want our organization to work, and tell some really meaningful stories. And so, one of our key pillars in both of my organizations has been telling the stories of our people so that the rest of the workforce sees themselves in that work. And there's that age-old story about the cafeteria worker in NASA being asked what they were there to do, and they answered, "I'm here to put a man on the moon." At PNNL, I want every employee to say, "I'm here, to do world-class science." And whether they are a scientist or they're a communicator or they're someone working to build our facilities, we want everybody to see themselves in the mission. And so building stories around our mission has been really, really important.
To feel understood is so powerful.
It's what we all want.
Yeah, absolutely. And as communicators, I think we really have a responsibility to try and figure out how to create that, and not in some sort of a manufactured way, but in a true, genuine delivering based on what people need and understanding what it is they want.
And I couldn't agree with you more on that, Mandy. I think that's also where communicators, your human resource organizations, your culture and diversity organizations can really come together to be a hub to pull all of these pieces together to really develop that place of belonging for your workforce.
I couldn't agree more. So I was going to ask you, and I feel like you kind of touched upon it in your last comment, but I was going to ask you if you have any general tips for communicators and communications teams as they endeavor to avoid the intranet fail, as they really think about how to do intranets well.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of things. First, I think you need to know who your partners are and who you want to bring to the table with you. And like I said, I think, human resource has always been a huge partner of mine. Our diversity, equity, inclusion offices have been huge partners of mine because they really help build stories. I think as you build your intranet plan, building your internal content plan and understanding how that dovetails with kind of the technology that you have in place is really important. And I think my third piece of advice is to think about it as a, a, a leg of your internal communication stools. I mean, now we have so many different social media ways to communicate. You have, workforce messages, you have leadership communications. Internet is really the front door to all of those things. So how do you use it to bring all of your employee engagement experiences to life for the workforce?
It's a good question. And I think you've given us so many tips and advice today to help us get a little bit further along that path. Any additional, just general communications wisdom that you want to leave us with?
I think the one piece of wisdom I would leave you with is communicators should be thought partners in our organizations. And so, really look for the opportunities to understand where your company, your organization, your agency is going and how communications can help you get there, whether it's, building your engagement strategy for your workforce or helping advance your business goals on the outside. Put yourself at the table and help an organization understand what's possible through communications.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
A huge thank you to our sponsor, Ragan, Mandy Zarinsky-Hurst, and our featured guests for being a part of our new segment. If you're interested in more information about Ragan's Communications Leadership Council, an exclusive membership for senior-level communicators and their entire communications teams, please go to commscouncil@ragan.com. Internal Comms Pro, the podcast, is also proudly supported by the Circle Broadcast Suite, an entire suite built for internal communicators. Learn more at circle.com. Internal Comms Pro, the podcast, is produced by the Internal Comms Pro Collective. Don't forget to visit www.internalcommspro.com/show notes for our free resource guides. Thank you for listening.